question and answer if anybody has any questions for us. So really, I guess the title of the talk, we agreed some time ago when we had a clash of events, we had to change the dates of this event, and I was originally to be in Oslo with you over there. But the benefits of cooperating across borders is the title of the talk. It's a slightly longer version. This is not a Brexit talk for anybody in the room who thinks it might be, despite what's happening in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe at the moment. Really, we want to just try and touch a little bit on some of the parallels and the collaboration that's happening between the two programs. And as a wise person who's in the audience in Oslo said to me recently, I guess Norway and Ireland are really our pioneers in this space of seabed mapping and habitat mapping. And what we've done over the last couple of decades, effectively, has really set the scene in terms of what now is embedded in the UN Decade of the Oceans as a global plan or a global endeavour. So with that in mind, we're just going to power ahead. And before I sort of give a little bit of background on what our own program is about, and its very short intro to that, we've been talking about it at length over the last 2 days here. But you know, there's some big questions in relation to the world's big oceans, and what we do has a significant impact across all sectors of marine activity and human interests. So we actually need to answer these questions as a collective. We can't do it on our own, and just a few random ones here. What exactly do we need to know about our oceans? How much data do we actually have in relation to what we have globally, in whether it's seabed mapping or habitat mapping? We don't know the answer to this yet. How should we value our ocean resources? We were at Ocean Obs recently, and there's been a lot of discussion, both in the hydrographic community. My counterpart, Sean Cullen, in Geological Survey, is involved in how do you do a proper cost assessment, value assessment and track the value of ocean mapping. We need to develop standards and protocols so that all of these cost-benefit analyses, we did one in 2008, that they all sort of are interchangeable and that they mean something. How will we monitor and manage change in the future is something that we're only starting to sort of get to the tip of the iceberg in that area. And what people resources do we need? So people talk about capacity build all the time, but really, what if we were to look to 10 years' time with a view to, at the end of the UN Decade of the Oceans, having mapped the world's oceans and having a proper understanding of all things ocean related? How many hydrographers do we need? How many benthic ecologists do we need? How many ocean literacy folk do we need to tell the story? So really, we have to educate ourselves to the answers to these questions before we can start to tell everybody else. And we need to do it collectively, and we need to talk to each other. And hence, this is the reason we're trying to have this conversation during the two national mapping program events, is to really just to start to try and talk outside of the room a little bit more. And that's something we need to bring into the conversation as seabed mapping folk internationally, because we tend to be guilty a little bit of speaking to ourselves a lot and not necessarily to other communities. In the room, for your information, here today in Dingle, we have people involved in landscape studies, in heritage interests, we have divers, we have education folk, we have teachers, we have retired civil servants who've been involved in the very, very early days of the programme. We have cross-border folk from Northern Ireland. We've had tourism talks talking about the value of our data in terms of developing services and support for all sorts of cross-sectoral marine activities. This one slide is just a quick one on the snapshot of what Infomar is doing and where we're at. It's sort of the data set you see on the top right. Many of you will have seen before. It's the coverage in terms of where we're at right now. The National Mapping Programme is done jointly with the Geological Survey and Marine Institute. It's funded by the Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment, and it's embedded in our national programme planning. The National Marine Plan Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth has a specific action 23, to do this mapping to underpin all other ocean activities in Ireland's marine territory. We have 3 elements to the programme. There's a mapping acquisition element to it. We have a big data component to this to deliver all our data and manage all the data. And we have the whole research and development area which we're getting stronger at. It originally would have been a sort of an 80-10, well, let's say 70-20-10 rule of acquisition, data, value-added exploitation, and we're trying to turn that on its head as the program rolls out to completion in 2026. The intention is that we've a lot more activity developed through partnerships with industry, with research funding to really bring the business growth behind Infomar to take the value out of the data that we have. And we're providing direct support across all government organizations, across all marine sectors, with a view to developing better spatial data for resource and risk management. Another single slide. This is on the left-hand side of this image. You see the front door of our website. It's basically a new website we put together and launched last year, but it allows the user to come in as a business person, as a government person who needs spatial data for decision, or as just a general person in the, I suppose a student or somebody in the public domain who has no scientific interest. So we're trying to provide this information to all different aspects of Irish society and internationally as well. In terms of resources, we have developed lots of expertise, obviously, in mapping spatial data, but also in the technology and the data management and data delivery services behind that to deliver all these products. Roughly, there's about 30 personnel working on Infomar across the two organizations, and that's a blend of staff and contract support. We have 6 vessels operational, supporting the mapping activities, 4 coastal, 2 offshore. We have core national funding for the program to the tune of 4 million a year through to completion in 2026. And we have international project funding that comes as we get involved in various projects I'll touch on in a minute. We have lots of research and development activity. We've directly funded 46 projects to the tune of €1.25 million. Small projects typically around €30,000 per project. We engage in research more so than undertake it directly. So we don't have a strong, I suppose, focus on academic publications and science data analysis and interpretation. We do some of that, but we largely enable the research community and fund the research community to do it, and we engage with industry to become, I suppose, partners in delivery and development of their services. We do a lot of work in the space of outreach and public engagement. Seafest is an event we have annually as part of our National Ocean Wealth Conference, and that typically has in the order of 100,000 attendees. And seabed mapping becomes a central focus of that event, and we engage with people through various mechanisms, sandboxes, interactive products and maps that we generate for the local area the events are held. So we get involved in various things like PT Young Scientists, maritime festivals regionally around the country, and we do a lot of international and national conferences and ship tours when the vessels are on site. We make them open to the public. Recently, in the capacity build space, which is going to become more and more important in the coming 3 to 5 years, we are currently working on an MSc module, which will be delivered in Q1 next year in February, if the date's right. And in parallel, that will also, a similar version of that module will run out to the Eurofleets program as well, seabed mapping education week, if you want, which is partly blended learning, classroom and onboard vessels. So this is some of the actual collaboration that's ongoing. I don't have time to get into these, but really a whistle-stop tour with some of the acronym busters on top right there for people who aren't familiar with some of these projects. But EMODNet is something that most of you in Oslo will be very familiar with. Some people here in the room will, but it's a data network. There's been discussion here on it already. GeoERA is a European Geological Surveys research area to try and get the consortium of geological surveys to sort of focus on research delivery and service development across Europe. Under the IHO, the International Hydrographic Office, and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, there's 2 key programs there that we support: GEBCO, which is a global bathymetric data set, and seabed 2030, which is really, I guess, a data network at this stage in terms of compiling a map of the world's oceans by 2030. That's an ambitious endeavor, but as I say, it's at a very early stage at this point. And I know some of you in Oslo were involved in that as well, and providing data into that. Sean is involved in the IHO EU Network Working Group. Under the Mission Atlantic, the green there is just referring to something that's live, pending decision, if you want. That's a Horizon 2020 project, integrated ecosystem assessment focused. We're working with IMR and other partners on that. Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance, in the second row, is an initiative that's coming to an end in March, and this has really been a collaboration in ocean research and communication and seabed mapping in the space between Canada, Europe, and the US. There's a follow-on funded program by the Commission called Anchor, which extends into the Southern Atlantic. One of the spin-offs for that that's relevant to this discussion is the Atlantic Seabed Mapping International Working Group, which needs a new acronym. At the moment, that's due to finish with AORA in March, but again, it has created a group which has worked together, and after our first meeting, we mapped 20,000 square kilometers a month later, just opportunistically by putting some people from each region on a vessel and turning on the mapping systems. So collectively, we've mapped over 100,000 square kilometers in 2 years of ocean, high seas, seabed, which is contributing to Seabed 2030. Eurofleets, Aidan Fitzgerald gave a talk earlier, obviously, on this, is another project we're supporting, and I mentioned already the training program in that. Sea Rover is a habitat mapping project. Offshore Reef Survey, which is, again, had support and partnership with IMR in Norway. Horizon Europe, again, green, it's around the corner, it's coming fairly quickly, but the next Horizon program in healthy ocean seas, coastal and inland waters is an area that we should be collectively looking at in terms of the management teams across the programs and having some discussions about how can we leverage from that program funding, but more importantly, how can we pass on the knowledge we've learned through our own initiatives. The MIM working group, MAREANO-INFOMAR-MAREMAP, is a formal collaboration, which again is a three-way discussion across seabed sampling planning, seabed classification, and there's been a lot of discussion and real good outputs from that, technical discussions on how do you develop standards and methodologies in those areas. We have also obviously been engaging in various ways. So as I say, working groups, various projects we've partnered on, research opportunities we've jointly bid on, and there's been informal one-to-one connections, exchanges of cost-benefit analysis documentation that have supported, I believe, the successful Norwegian inshore mapping program, which I believe is announced. So congratulations on that. This is just one snapshot of the Sea Rover project, which Rebecca Ross in Oslo there with you today, I believe, was involved in, amongst various other partners across Europe. And this was a national endeavour in Ireland to go back, revisit the features on the seabed that we identified based on the hydrographic mapping we had done previously. And so we had a really successful partnership internally across government in Ireland to support this. And particularly in Infomar, Yvonne and David in Parks and Wildlife, the Marine Institute, Janine in Geological Survey, and a whole array of people got on board this project. And over 3 years, we did very, very extensive habitat mapping, revisiting some of the features we had seen before. To whiz on a bit, the UN Decade is something that a lot of people are familiar with, and some people haven't had a chance to look into. But just in relation to what was recently communicated on it 2 weeks ago at Ocean Obs, Sustainable Development Goal 14 is something that everybody in the marine domain will be familiar with. Conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas and marine resources. But in terms of what it's about, knowledge, infrastructure, partnerships, science, data and information to inform policies. This is exactly what MAREANO and what Infomar are doing. And that's exactly the people we have in the room here today, and you have in your room over there in Oslo. It's really data for knowledge for better management. This is some of the defined outcomes, or possible outcomes. 2 brochures on the left you see that the Ocean Decade have published. And mapping the world's ocean is in there explicitly, as is an inventory of ocean ecosystems. So again, the work that's been done through the 2 programs is now something that is globally being aspired to happen through the UN Decade. This is a specific slide that was presented, and these are the research and development priority areas of that of the decade. And again, you've got mapped the entire ocean processes. The ones in green on the top are really, I suppose, most specifically linked to what we do in MAREANO and INFOMAR. Conduct an inventory of ecosystems and their functioning, strengthen capacities and accelerate technology transfer and ocean literacy. And for people in Norway who haven't seen the agenda here, we have brought in a strong ocean literacy and education and awareness sort of element to this program, and it's explicitly to sort of start that conversation between the seabed mapping community and the educators, the people that are engaging with society and our children, and telling them what's valuable about the seas. We are currently delivering the text on the bottom of this slide is related. The green is stuff we're doing already, and the grey bold text is things that we could potentially strengthen a little bit. But that's explicitly what they've published. Originally it was a digital atlas of the ocean, and now we're talking about mapping the entire ocean floor and processes. This is a very wordy slide, just the red text, but I've given it to you so that you can extract the text and look at it later. But the red text is referencing what's under that mapping, comprehensive mapping research priority area. Georeferenced atlas, knowledge at various scales, new research and development, and not just terrain mapping. It's physical, biological, chemical, habitat, ecosystems, cultural. And just on the bottom, in terms of the red text at the bottom of the slide, it infers that seabed 2030 is going to deliver the world ocean mapping by 2030. It's really a data network at this point. It needs operational programs like MAREANO and INFOMAR to actually deliver. So where do we fit into all that as mapping programs? What can we do as folk involved in these types of initiatives? We need to look at what's happening exactly in detail in this UN decade and align our activities a little bit to link in with it, because there will be opportunities that will come through the mission program and elsewhere. We need to really have more specific stakeholder engagement, better stakeholder engagement, and improved science for policy and society. And it requires ocean basin scale cooperation. I'm conscious of the clock. This is the conference statement that came out of OceanObs. Despite lots of specific text from the seabed mapping community that went into it, we did achieve the word seafloor being incorporated to what was primarily an oceanographic community paper, which will dictate what happens. This is a once in a decade event, that conference, and it will dictate the real sort of endeavors or ambitions, if you want, of the community over the next 10 years. So what next in terms of what we could potentially do together? We have, I suppose, an intention to fully intend to continue with the MIM activities, develop standards, methodologies, leverage organizational expertise, and really try and expand the one-to-one connections that are there. So it's not just the senior management who meet each other at conferences, but the technical scientists start to speak to each other amongst the various organizations in Norway and Ireland. We want to consider the Q1 potentially having an early next year exploratory management meeting to discuss plans, opportunities between INFOMAR and MAREANO in the space of looking forward to the next few years. And we need to be looking at collaboration to deliver seabed and habitat mapping, so we're not duplicating effort and we don't end up with 2 different sets of standards. And in a European context and global context, there will be mechanisms for us to partner on things, on programs and activities. On the left is some events coming up that we will be engaged in. And I guess the MIM workshop, second bottom from the left, is Q1 2020. And we'll pick up on the discussion there. So that's it from me. Apologies for slightly running over time for you there in Norway. But I'm going to put you back on the screen, and hopefully you may be able to field a question if anybody has any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're running out of time, but maybe we have a question or a comment. Yes, there's one. Somebody you know, I'm sure.
Thank you, Tommy, for an excellent presentation, and I'm so happy that all the technicalities went well as well. I'm very interested in hearing about your point 3 in a way, the added value thing, and also the ocean literacy actions that you do. I think that is something that you have a much higher level of activity in than us in MAREANO. So could you, in a few words, describe a bit more about your ocean literacy and your added value activities?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. I guess in terms of the added value part, we have over the years had various funding calls for research where we've picked research topics which had potential technical development opportunity areas, so software development opportunity areas which we saw that the commercial sector weren't meeting, and we'd scope these out and we'd put an open call out. So we historically funded typically €30,000 projects, which was enough for a small to medium enterprise to work on something for 6 months or 12 months, or enough for a master's student to turn around a product in 12 months. We weren't able to do multi-annual funding, but that gave us a really good start in engaging with small industry and research, individual researchers across the country, and a lot of positive things have come out of that. In more recent years, some of the well, let's say that there are some new startups with really exciting global opportunities arising in Ireland, and so we're in there at the very early stage with these companies to make sure that in the context of autonomous vehicles that they understand the complexities of the technology, that we bring them on the vessels, we show them the mapping gear. So these guys are engineers or they're business development folk, or they're just genuine entrepreneurs. And so we're able to engage with people, show them the data, and basically give them that quick start and show them where the opportunities are, which the commercial market doesn't deliver. So that's some of the stuff around that. The ocean literacy space, because we have no more than yourselves these amazing data sets and terrain models and fly-throughs, we have in part we have gone willingly, and in other parts we've been pulled kicking and screaming to every ocean education event that's happened in the country, because people engage so much with the products we have. So we developed the first sandbox that we were aware of, which allowed kids to get in there and shape the sand in order to create the contours and the colored terrain maps so that they could conceptually understand the connection between topography and a flat 2D map. And you know, things like the real map of Ireland. And Ireland then has set up this network of fantastic motivated individuals. Some of it's delivered through the aquariums, some of it's delivered through people who set up their own companies, and we've had presentations today and yesterday from some of these folk. And they have this understanding of how to communicate this to the public. So we're on the panel for the Global Ocean Science Educators Forum in Washington in November, and some of those events that I listed on that last slide, you can have a look through them. It gives you a sense of, I suppose, what we're doing is directly getting involved and telling people the story.
Thank you. I think we have to call this a success. It worked real well. So thank you so much for joining our seminar. And I think we're going to go just move on with the rest of our program.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us and for risking the experiment. It went well, and take care and enjoy the rest of your program. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.